My name is Joy Buchanan with YCAT, and we're here today for the next installment of the History Of. Today we're going to focus on the Crossroads community, and we have with us Dorothy Ewing and her husband Dub Ewing, and they are going to tell us what they know about the Crossroads community and what it was like growing up out there, just everything we need to know. So I'm going to turn it over to them.
Okay. Dub and I got married in 1947, and we moved out to the Crossroads community in 1948. And he can tell you a lot about growing up out there.
Well, of course, I was born on my grandfather's property. Of course, it belonged to my father at this time.
What was your grandfather's name?
He was James Robert Ewing. We call, I tell everybody that I'm JR with my grandfather.
And what was your dad's name?
He was called Cat Ewing. Everybody knew him as Cat Ewing. His name was Thomas Arliss, T.A. Ewing. I was born in January the 4th, 1926. And then, of course, they moved away for a while when I was very small. In fact, they lived over at Boxside a while. He worked over there for one of the mills over there at that time. And of course, the Depression hit, so they moved back on my grandfather's place on my mother's side, and then we finally moved back to the old place when I was approximately 4 years old. And then I lived there till me and Dorothy got married, except for a time that I was in service. So, you done? Of course, the community at that time and during those years was mostly a farming community. There wasn't much public work went on. Of course, the Depression years was everybody was in the same boat. They didn't have very much except what they raised on the farm. Of course, the only cash crop we had was raising cotton. We'd raise a little cotton, and that was a few years later than the Depression years. So I went to school at Harmony Grove, graduated from there in 1944, and that was the year I went in service. We got married in 1947 when I came back out of service.
Where exactly was the Crossroads community?
Well, it's approximately 7 miles. At the old time was approximately 7 miles from Benton. Now then, it's right on the interstate. We went up the old Highway 67 out of Benton towards Malvern, and then turned off a little county road that went into the Crossroads community. Of course, originally it was the old 21 community, which was a school district. Of course, it consolidated with Harmony Grove, Hickory Grove, which has grown to be a very big school now. Mm-hmm.
Why was the name changed?
A church was organized out there in 1933, and in January of 1934, they decided to change the name from 21 to Crossroads. One of the ladies that lived in the community said she guessed that 21 sounded too much like a nightclub, so they didn't want that and having the church out there. But there were several colorful characters that lived in that community. One of them was Dub's dad, and then there was a lady by the name of Ethel Graham. And the cows ran out. They didn't keep them up during the day. They just had free range out there. and they all had cowbells so that they could find them. Well, Ethel hated cowbells, and so Dub's daddy's cows always got close to her house at night. Well, she'd go down there and take all the cowbells off of them, and then it was trouble. They loved each other to death, but they talked terrible to each other.
Do you know why or how they came up with the name Crossroads? Did roads cross there, or?
I suppose you could, Old 88 was bordered on one side of it towards Hot Springs, and then 167, so I guess, or 67. So I guess that's the way they got the name Crossroads, by those two roads.
Oh, okay.
And also there were several little roads that went off to other communities, like the Point View community that it was a school district also. And so I imagine that was the reason he said Crossroads.
Is there anything left out there now of the community?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, it's a in fact, I got a nephew that lives on the old place, or part of the old place, and he's got a sister that owns a piece of the property of the old place, I think.
And there's the church is really thriving out there, and as far as I know, there's a few, not very many of the old time people still live out there. They're all younger generation, but it's still a real nice little community to live in.
There's a lot of descendants of the old people that lived there whenever I was a youngster, still living in that community.
Tell us the story about what they found when they were putting the freeway in.
Well, they kept seeing, well, it'd be about a mile or so down from the church, they kept seeing this black streak down there. Couldn't figure out what it was, and they got to checking, and it was shark's teeth. It's where, you know, many years ago, Arkansas was underwater, and that this shark's teeth were from that.
Oh, what they done when they cut the highway through there and the hill, you know, the soil was black, the shark teeth wasn't. That's right. And then they got to, we had some of the shark teeth at one time, but we don't know what happened to them.
Oh, well, maybe you'll find them. That's a
No,
piece of history.
Yeah.
I'm sure one of our children have them, and they'll turn up one of these days.
What was it like growing up? I guess back then it was out in the middle of nowhere, practically.
Well, yeah, we was about 7 miles out of town. Of course, you wasn't much transportation except a wagon and horse or going by walking. When we was small, very few automobiles at that time. I had a great uncle, wasn't it? Uncle Sam, that bought a T-model, I believe it was a T-model, drove it home from Benton, and he was one of the few that had an automobile. Of course, my grandfather on my mother's side, he had a T-model or A model later on, but he lived, he didn't live in the Crossroads community, he lived more in the Point View community. So the transportation was by foot or horseback or wagon and mules mostly.
What did y'all do for fun?
Ma'am?
What did you do for fun?
We did we'd play a little, of course at school, you know, we played softball and basketball. Of course, we didn't have a big gym to play in at school. We played out in the outdoor court, and of course that was kind of cool in the wintertime and kind of rough on the knees and elbows and what have you, but that was the main thing that we had at school. Of course, we played with marbles. I guess I don't guess kids know what playing marbles is now, but had holes in the ground and shoot the marbles and make them roll in the hole and all that kind of stuff.
You'd get a hook and a tin can and
Yeah, and take a metal ring off an old wagon hub that been wore out and they disposed of, and you'd take a stick and put a crossbar on it and roll that hook up and down the road or in the yard or wherever. And that's mostly, I mean, we didn't have a whole lot of, do a little possum hunting in the wintertime.
tell about your bicycle. Building a bicycle.
What you talking about?
Did you build yourself a bicycle out of old parts?
Yeah, but I couldn't tell you much more